A city council meeting in a small Midwestern town appeared routine. 5 council members sat behind a raised platform. In the audience, approximately 30 residents waited to speak during the public comment period. The council had scheduled a vote on a controversial zoning change that would, according to the proposal, allow a major corporation to build a distribution center on land currently designated as a community park. For weeks, residents had voiced opposition. They had attended meetings. They had submitted written comments, but observers noted that the council seemed unmoved. The vote, many assumed, was a foregone conclusion. Then a woman in her 70s approached the microphone. She introduced herself simply as Mrs. Elena Rodriguez. According to witnesses, she carried a manila folder and spoke in a quiet, measured voice. For the next 10 minutes, what she revealed would reportedly transform the entire proceeding and shift the balance of power in a way no one had anticipated. By the end of the meeting, 3 council members had changed their votes. The corporate deal was dead, and the story of what happened became a viral example of how underestimating ordinary citizens can lead to extraordinary reversals. Before we examine this remarkable turn of events and what it reveals about civic engagement and accountability, make sure to hit that like button right now and subscribe to our channel for more commentary on stories where power dynamics shift in unexpected ways. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss when we analyze moments where everything changes. Now let's look at what really happened. The town and the controversy. Millbrook was a town of approximately 15,000 people, according to census data. Located about 50 miles from a major metropolitan area, it had maintained what residents described as a small-town character despite gradual growth over recent decades. Riverside Park sat at the center of the community, literally and figuratively. The 12-acre green space had served residents for over 60 years. Families held reunions there. The town hosted summer concerts in its pavilion. Children played on its equipment. For many residents, the park represented what they valued about their community. 6 months before this council meeting, according to public records, a major logistics company had approached the city with a proposal. They wanted to purchase Riverside Park and build a regional distribution center. In exchange, they offered the town $8 million, a promise to build a smaller replacement park on the edge of town, and projections of 200 new jobs. The city council, facing budget pressures and declining tax revenues, was reportedly intrigued. 3 of the 5 council members, forming a majority, had signaled support for the proposal almost immediately. The council's position, the 3 council members who favored the deal made their case publicly, according to meeting records and local news reports. They argued that the town needed economic development. The $8 million would fund infrastructure repairs and pay down municipal debt. The new jobs would benefit the local economy, and the replacement park, while smaller, would be modern and well-equipped. Council President David Thornton had been particularly vocal in supporting the proposal. According to media reports, he characterized opposition as nostalgia-driven and economically naive. "We can't let sentimentality stand in the way of progress," he was quoted as saying at one meeting. The 2 council members who opposed the deal, Patricia Wong and Marcus Johnson, reportedly raised concerns about property values, quality of life, and the adequacy of the replacement park. But as the minority, their influence appeared limited. The community response residents had mobilized in opposition, according to local reporting. They formed a Save Riverside Park coalition. They gathered over 2,000 signatures on a petition. They showed up to council meetings wearing green shirts to symbolize the park. They spoke passionately during public comment periods about what the park meant to them and their families. But observers noted that the council majority seemed unmoved. Thornton and his allies listened politely, according to witnesses, but their minds appeared made up. Some residents reported feeling dismissed or patronized when they raised concerns. "They acted like we were being emotional and unreasonable," one resident told a local reporter, "like they knew better than we did what was good for our own community." The vote had been scheduled for this meeting. Despite weeks of opposition, most observers expected the 3-member majority to approve the deal. The corporation had already begun preliminary site preparations, according to reports, apparently confident of approval. Elena Rodriguez, Mrs. Elena Rodriguez, was, by most accounts, a fixture in Millbrook. She had lived there for 45 years after immigrating from Mexico as a young woman, according to community members who knew her. She had worked as a teacher for 30 years before retiring. Neighbors described her as quiet, kind, and deeply involved in community life. What few people knew, according to later revelations, was that Mrs. Rodriguez had spent her retirement years becoming something of an expert in municipal law and public records. She had taken courses at a local community college. She had learned to navigate state transparency laws, and she had developed skills in document research that would prove crucial. For several weeks before this council meeting, sources later indicated, Mrs. Rodriguez had been making public records requests. She had been reviewing city documents, corporate filings, and financial disclosures. And what she found, according to her subsequent statements, deeply concerned her. She had signed up to speak at this meeting along with dozens of other residents. But unlike the emotional appeals that had characterized previous testimony, witnesses reported that Mrs. Rodriguez came prepared with something different. Documentation. The setup as the meeting began, according to those present, the atmosphere was tense but resigned. The park supporters knew they would likely lose. The council majority appeared confident. The corporate representatives, sitting in the back of the room, reportedly looked relaxed. The public comment period began. One by one, residents approached the microphone to make their final pleas. Some were emotional, some were angry. All, according to observers, seemed to understand they were going through motions rather than changing minds. Then Mrs. Rodriguez's name was called. Witnesses reported that she walked slowly to the microphone, placed her manila folder on the podium, and put on her reading glasses. She thanked the council for the opportunity to speak. And then, according to multiple accounts, she began a presentation that would change everything. The opening, "I want to talk about conflicts of interest," Mrs. Rodriguez reportedly began, her voice steady despite what witnesses described as visible nervousness. The room went quiet, according to observers. Council President Thornton looked up from his papers. The corporate representatives in the back straightened in their seats. Mrs. Rodriguez continued, according to accounts. "I've spent several weeks reviewing public records. I've learned a lot about how our city government works, and I've discovered some things that I believe the public has a right to know." She opened her folder and pulled out what appeared to be copies of documents. "First," she reportedly said, "I'd like to discuss Council President Thornton's relationship with the corporation seeking to purchase our park." The first revelation, according to witnesses, Mrs. Rodriguez then detailed information she had obtained through public records requests. She stated that Thornton's wife worked as a consultant for a subsidiary of the parent company that owned the Logistics Corporation. The job had begun approximately 8 months earlier, 2 months before the corporation first approached the city with its proposal. The connection wasn't illegal, Mrs. Rodriguez acknowledged according to reports, but she questioned whether it created a perception of conflict. "The council president's household receives income from the same corporate family that stands to benefit from this vote," she stated according to witnesses. Thornton reportedly interrupted at this point. "My wife's employment is completely separate from this matter," he said according to accounts. "There is no conflict of interest." Mrs. Rodriguez responded calmly, witnesses said. "Perhaps not legally, but I believe the public deserves to know about this connection. Transparency matters." Several audience members began whispering. The corporate representatives, according to observers, now looked concerned rather than relaxed. The second revelation, Mrs. Rodriguez moved to her next point, according to reports. She pulled out another document, what appeared to be property records. "I also discovered," she stated according to witnesses, "that Council Member Stevens, one of the other votes in favor of the deal, owns property adjacent to the proposed replacement park location. Property that would likely increase significantly in value if the new park is built next to it." Stevens reportedly protested. "That information is public record. I've done nothing wrong." "I didn't say you did anything wrong," Mrs. Rodriguez replied according to accounts. "I said the public deserves to know. When council members have financial interests that might be affected by their votes, citizens should be aware." The mood in the room was shifting, observers noted. Residents who had seemed resigned now appeared energized. The council members who had been confident now looked defensive. The third revelation, Mrs. Rodriguez wasn't finished, according to witnesses. She pulled out more documents, what appeared to be communications between city officials and the corporation. "I also obtained," she stated, email exchanges between city staff and corporate representatives. These emails show that preliminary discussions about this deal began nearly a year ago, long before the public was informed. long before any community input was sought. She read excerpts, according to reports. In one email, a corporate representative allegedly wrote, "We appreciate the council's willingness to work with us before bringing this to public attention. Early alignment will make the process smoother." Another email, Mrs. Rodriguez stated, showed city officials discussing how to present the proposal to the public to minimize opposition. "This isn't how democracy is supposed to work," she said, according to witnesses, her voice rising slightly for the first time. "Major decisions affecting our community shouldn't be negotiated in private before residents even know what's happening." The Defense Crumbles Council President Thornton attempted to respond, according to observers. He argued that preliminary discussions are normal, that there was nothing improper about exploring options before public presentation, that Mrs. Rodriguez was taking things out of context. But the damage was done, witnesses reported, even if nothing technically illegal had occurred. And legal experts later confirmed that the various revelations didn't constitute criminal activity. The perception of a process designed to minimize public input while favoring a predetermined outcome had been created. Mrs. Rodriguez addressed this directly, according to accounts. "I'm not accusing anyone of breaking laws," she said. "I'm pointing out that the process has not been transparent, that connections exist that weren't disclosed, that decisions appear to have been made before community input was seriously considered." She paused, then added, according to witnesses, "And I'm reminding this council that they work for us, not for corporations, not for their private interests, for the citizens of this town." The room erupted in applause, according to multiple accounts. Thornton reportedly tried to gavel for order, but the demonstration continued for nearly a minute. The vote postponed in the chaos that followed, according to reports. One of the three council members who had supported the deal, Council Member Roberts, requested a postponement of the vote. "I think we need time to address these concerns," he reportedly said. Thornton resisted, according to witnesses, but the other council members agreed with Roberts. Even Stevens, whose property interests Mrs. Rodriguez had revealed, reportedly acknowledged that postponing might be wise given the concerns that have been raised. The vote was delayed, sources indicated, for 2 weeks to allow for further review and public input. As the meeting adjourned, observers reported, Mrs. Rodriguez was surrounded by grateful residents. Media representatives requested interviews, and the balance of power in the debate over Riverside Park had shifted dramatically. The story goes viral within 24 hours. According to media reports, the story of Mrs. Rodriguez's presentation had spread well beyond Millbrook. Local news coverage was picked up by regional media. Social media accounts shared video of her testimony. National news outlets ran stories about the grandmother who took on City Hall. The narrative was compelling, observers noted. An ordinary citizen using transparency laws and diligent research to challenge powerful interests. An underestimated older woman revealing information that shifted public debate. A civics lesson in action. Commentary across various platforms was largely supportive, according to analysis of social media and news coverage. Many praised Mrs. Rodriguez's thorough preparation and calm demeanor. Some framed the story as an example of democracy working as intended. Others saw it as evidence of how citizen engagement can counter insider dealing. Different perspectives emerge, however. Reactions were not uniformly positive, and different groups interpreted the events differently. Some government transparency advocates celebrated the story as proof that sunshine laws work when citizens use them. "This is exactly why public records laws exist," one good government organization stated, according to reports, "to allow citizens to hold their officials accountable." Conservative commentators, according to media monitoring, tended to frame the story as about government overreach and crony capitalism. They emphasized the behind-the-scenes coordination between officials and the corporation as evidence of how government and big business collude against ordinary citizens. Progressive voices, according to reports, highlighted themes of corporate power and community resistance. They saw Mrs. Rodriguez's actions as an example of grassroots organizing against gentrification and privatization of public spaces. Municipal officials in other communities reportedly expressed concern about the story's implications. Some worried it would make routine preliminary discussions with potential developers more difficult. Others suggested the coverage oversimplified the complexities of local governance. Questions about process legal and government experts raised various questions about the underlying issues, according to published analysis. Constitutional law scholars noted that while transparency is important, some preliminary discussions need to happen before public presentation. You can't negotiate complex deals in full public view from the beginning, one expert told reporters. But there's a balance between necessary confidentiality and inappropriate secrecy. Ethics experts debated whether the connections Mrs. Rodriguez revealed actually constituted conflicts of interest. Thornton's wife's employment with a subsidiary of the parent company was indirect, they noted. Stevens' property ownership near the proposed new park location wasn't necessarily problematic. Context matters, one ethics professor stated according to reports. But perception matters too. Local government specialists suggested that Millbrook's experience highlighted the importance of clear ethics policies and disclosure requirements. If these connections had been publicly disclosed from the beginning, one analyst wrote, this controversy might have been avoided. The corporation's response, the logistics company issued a statement, according to media reports, expressing disappointment at how the situation had developed. They maintained that their discussions with city officials had been appropriate and that they had operated in good faith throughout. We followed all applicable laws and regulations, a company spokesperson was quoted as saying. We're disappointed that our intentions have been mischaracterized. The company also noted that the jobs and economic benefits they offered were real and would significantly help the community. Some observers sympathetic to the development suggested that emotional attachment to the park was preventing rational consideration of economic needs. The community divided within Millbrook itself. According to local reporting, the controversy deepened existing divisions. Park supporters felt vindicated by Mrs. Rodriguez's revelations. Development supporters felt frustrated that what they saw as economic opportunity was being derailed by technicalities and process complaints. Some residents who had supported the deal reportedly felt that Mrs. Rodriguez had unfairly questioned the integrity of elected officials. She made it sound like corruption when it was just normal business, one supporter told a local reporter. Others who had opposed the deal felt that the revelations confirmed their suspicions about how the process had been handled. We knew something wasn't right about how this was being rushed through, one opponent stated according to reports. The division in the community highlighted how transparency issues can intersect with substantive policy disagreements, making resolution more difficult. The subsequent vote 2 weeks after Mrs. Rodriguez's presentation, the city council reconvened to vote on the park proposal, according to public records. The meeting drew an even larger crowd than before. In the interim, according to reports, significant developments had occurred. Council member Roberts, one of the three who had supported the deal, announced he would vote against it. He stated that the revelations about the process had given him concerns about moving forward. Council President Thornton and Council member Stevens maintained their support for the deal, according to reports. But with Roberts switching sides, the vote was now 3-2 against the proposal rather than 3-2 in favor. The corporation withdrew its offer before the vote could take place, according to media accounts. In a statement, they indicated that the controversy and changed political dynamics made moving forward untenable. They thanked city officials for their consideration, but stated they would pursue other locations. Riverside Park was saved, at least for the time being. But the victory came with costs and complications that would continue to affect the community. The political fallout in the months following these events, according to local reporting, Millbrook's political landscape shifted significantly. Council President Thornton faced growing calls to resign, though he resisted according to media accounts. At the next election cycle, he chose not to run for re-election. Council member Stevens did run, but was defeated by a candidate who had actively opposed the park deal. New council members, according to reports, emphasized transparency and community engagement in their campaigns. The controversy over Riverside Park became a defining issue in local politics for several election cycles. The city also reportedly implemented new ethics policies, including stricter disclosure requirements for potential conflicts of interest and more formalized processes for seeking public input on major decisions. Mrs. Rodriguez's role, Elena Rodriguez, became something of a local celebrity, according to those familiar with the situation. She was invited to speak at community groups and schools about civic engagement. Some urged her to run for city council herself, though she reportedly declined. In interviews, according to media reports, Mrs. Rodriguez consistently emphasized that she had simply used tools available to any citizen. "I'm not special," she told one reporter. "Anyone can make public records requests. Anyone can research these issues. I just took the time to do it." She also noted that her actions wouldn't have mattered without the community support that already existed. "I provided information," she stated according to reports. But hundreds of residents had already been showing up and speaking out. This was a collective effort. Some observers noted that Mrs. Rodriguez's age, gender, and immigrant background made her an unexpected figure to challenge City Hall, which may have contributed to both her initial underestimation and her eventual impact. "People didn't see her coming," one political analyst suggested. "That gave her an advantage." The broader implications the Millbrook story resonated beyond one small town because it touched on several themes relevant to communities across the country, according to analysts who studied the case. First, it highlighted the ongoing tension between economic development and community character. Many towns face similar pressures to accept development that brings jobs and tax revenue, but changes the nature of the community. Finding the right balance, observers noted, requires genuine public engagement rather than predetermined outcomes. Second, the story illustrated the power of transparency and public records laws. While these tools have always existed, many citizens don't know how to use them or don't believe they'll make a difference. Mrs. Rodriguez's success demonstrated that determined individuals can uncover important information. Third, the case raised questions about conflicts of interest and ethics in local government. The connections Mrs. Rodriguez revealed may not have been illegal, but they created perceptions of impropriety that undermined public trust. This suggested, some experts argued, that legal compliance isn't sufficient. Officials must also maintain public confidence. Fourth, observers noted the story showed how power dynamics can shift when underestimated people access information and use it effectively. Mrs. Rodriguez wasn't powerful in traditional terms. She had no official position, no wealth, no organizational backing. But she had knowledge, and she used it strategically. The unresolved questions despite the clear outcome. The park was saved, and political changes occurred. Several aspects of the situation remained debated. Some continued to argue that Millbrook had made a mistake by rejecting economic development. "They let emotion override economic sense," one business analyst wrote. The jobs and tax revenue the corporation offered were real, and some suggested the town would regret turning them down. Others questioned whether Mrs. Rodriguez's tactics, while legal, were entirely fair. By revealing information about officials' connections at a public meeting, some argued, she had created a hostile environment that made reasoned discussion difficult. "Public shaming isn't the same as democratic deliberation," one political scientist commented. The question of whether preliminary discussions between officials and developers should be more transparent remained unresolved. Some local government experts argued for more openness, while others maintained that some confidentiality is necessary for effective governance. What changed, and what didn't a year after the controversy? According to follow-up reporting, Riverside Park remained in community hands. The city had not found another major development opportunity to replace the revenue it had rejected. Property taxes had increased slightly to cover budget shortfalls, which some residents blamed on rejecting the corporate deal. However, surveys indicated that most residents remained satisfied with the outcome, according to local reporting. The park remained well-used and central to community life, and many citizens reported feeling more engaged in local government than before. The broader lessons about transparency, conflicts of interest, and citizen engagement continued to be debated in Millbrook and beyond. Some communities implemented reforms inspired by Millbrook's experience. Others concluded that the situation was unique and didn't require changes to their own processes. The enduring message for those who followed the story closely, several key insights emerged that transcended the specific details of one town's park controversy. First, many observers noted, assumptions about who has power and influence can be misleading. The council members initially appeared to be in complete control. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared to be just another concerned resident, but information and preparation shifted that dynamic dramatically. Second, the case demonstrated that democratic systems provide tools for citizen influence, public records laws, public comment periods, voting. But these tools only work when people use them. Mrs. Rodriguez's impact came from taking initiative that most citizens don't take. Third, the story illustrated how transparency isn't just a procedural nicety, but a fundamental requirement for democratic legitimacy. Even if nothing illegal had occurred, the perception that decisions were being made behind closed doors undermined public trust and support. Fourth, observers suggested the case showed the importance of treating all community members with respect. The council's apparent dismissal of resident concerns created resentment that made compromise impossible when controversy arose. Finally, the Millbrook story reminded people that outcomes aren't predetermined. Even when power imbalances seem decisive, determined individuals with good information and community support can shift the balance. If this analysis made you think about civic engagement, transparency in government, and how ordinary citizens can influence public decisions, smash that like button right now and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth commentary on stories where power dynamics shift unexpectedly. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts. Have you ever felt dismissed by officials or authorities? What tools do you think citizens have to hold government accountable? Thanks for watching, and remember, those in control often stay in control only until someone changes the balance of information and engagement. We'll see you in the next video.